Great. Welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Olga Horn. I'm a Senior Officer for Nature-Based Solutions and Biodiversity at the ICLEI World Secretariat, and I will be moderating today's webinar. So we're very excited to have you all here today to talk about mobilizing finance for urban biodiversity, reflections from the CBD COP16 and the path forward. So this is the last webinar of the Interact Bio project, so a bit of a bittersweet moment for us. However, we're all the more excited to be partnering with the Berlin Urban Nature Pact for this webinar. This is an initiative that was launched at the CBD COP16, which seeks to halt and reverse biodiversity loss to put nature on a path to recovery in cities worldwide by 2030, so quite ambitious. So if you move to the next slide, for today's webinar, my colleague Ingrid Kötze from the ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center will start us off with some reflections on the recently held Biodiversity COP and also reflect on the implications for cities and regions. Following, we will have my colleague Florian Freute from ICLEI Europe present the Berlin Urban Nature Pact that was launched at the Biodiversity COP. And if you move to the next slide, we will then hear from city practitioners and about their ambitions and strategies in support of urban biodiversity and also specifically to mobilize finance for urban biodiversity. So here we'll hear from representatives from Waterberg in South Africa, Vienna in Austria, and Hamburg in Germany. So moving to the next slide. So as I mentioned, first up, we'll hear from Ingrid Kötze. She's the Director of Biodiversity, Nature and Health at ICLEI Africa and leads the biodiversity and nature-based solutions work there. She serves as the technical lead on ICLEI's global biodiversity and nature advocacy work and has over 30 years of work experience. And in that role, she has produced many environmental policies and laws and managed numerous multidimensional large-scale projects. Unfortunately, she's already on leave, or I guess fortunately for her, but she was so kind to actually prepare us and send a video recording that we will now be showing.
Greetings, everyone. My presentation gives some reflections from CBD COP16 on mobilizing finance for urban biodiversity. COP16 took place from 21 October to 2 November in Cali, Colombia. It was the first biodiversity COP since the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in December 22 in Montreal. The agenda of 31 items included many important substantive items, such as the review of the implementation status of the GBF, updates from parties on their NBSAPs, the monitoring framework and mechanisms for planning, monitoring, reporting and review, strengthening the role of indigenous peoples, mobilizing financial resources for successful implementation and the finance mechanism, as well as several other items. Several of the decisions that were adopted at COP16 are relevant to cities. For example, the landmark decision on biodiversity and climate change, which includes reference to the nexus between ocean, climate, and biodiversity, calls on the COP presidencies, not just of the biodiversity COP, but also of the forthcoming climate COPs, to strengthen multilateral coordination, and invites parties and observers, including cities and subnational governments, to submit their views on options for increased and enhanced policy coherence between the three Rio conventions, which needs to be done before May 2025. In the second place, the decision adopted on biodiversity and health recognizes the role of subnational governments in minimizing and regulating pollution, and it also speaks to the importance of green and blue spaces in urban areas for human health, and there's a very specific role that cities and subnational governments can play in the Global One Health Action Plan. And then I think a third decision which speaks directly to cities is the one on mainstreaming biodiversity, where there are several references to what cities and subnational governments can do in relation to this topic. The final plenary of COP16 extended into the early hours of the following day, and it had to be suspended due to a lack of quorum. The parties decided that they would reconvene in Rome in February 2025 to consider and adopt the decisions that had not been dealt with. These included two very important decisions, one on resource mobilization and the finance mechanism, and the second one on the monitoring framework, as well as the decision related to planning, monitoring, review, and reporting. And these are important because they are instrumental for the global review of collective progress on the implementation of the GBF, which will be conducted at COP17 and COP19. And this obviously would also look into the implementation progress at the subnational levels. The 8th Summit for Subnational Governments and Cities was a major success. It had more than 2,000 delegates attending. It was held in the plenary negotiation hall in the Blue Zone on 26 October as an official parallel event to COP16. And the program was aligned with COP priorities, so we spoke to the whole point of implementation progress, as well as making peace with nature and resource mobilization. It received powerful endorsement and support from several parties, UN bodies, international organizations, and other networks, and several VIPs, including the CBD Executive Secretary and the COP presidency, applauded our summit as being a true demonstration of the whole of government and whole of society approach. Finance for urban biodiversity was a major focus at COP16, not just within the negotiations, but also at our summit. For example, this is where UNEP launched the 2024 Nature for Finance for Cities report, titled From Grey to Green, Better Data to Finance Nature in Cities, highlighting the need for better data and tools to help cities integrate nature-based solutions into their financial and planning frameworks. This was also where Quebec made an important announcement to the Global Biodiversity Fund, and the GEFCO called for reforms. One of the historic moments at the summit was the province of Quebec's announcement that it was intending to make a contribution to the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. This makes it the first subnational government ever to contribute to a global fund. And it really is very significant. With this contribution, it means that Quebec going forward will be able to participate very actively in the Global Biodiversity Fund Advisory Committee, and it does set an example for the whole of government approach. And the province indicated that they hoped that this would inspire not just other subnational governments, but also other major stakeholders to also make contributions to the Global Biodiversity Fund. Secretary Wade Crowfoot from the state of California in the US also made an important announcement at the summit on the topic of bridging the biodiversity finance gap. California is the 5th largest economy in the world and also located in a biodiversity hotspot. Now, to address the challenges that they have, including wildfires, droughts, and sea level rise, they have passed a state law demanding the preservation of 30% of the state lands and waters to support the 30 by 30 target. They also have a law to integrate wildlife connectivity into their new transport infrastructure. and they announced at the summit that they would commit to spending $1.2 billion in achieving the 30 by 30 targets. Biodiversity finance and increased investment in urban nature was also a key topic at the inaugural meeting of the Mayors Forum on Urban Nature and Biodiversity. This forum was held as an associated event of the 8th Summit under the Urban Nature Program. The Urban Nature Program is coordinated by the World Bank, UNEP, and ICLEI, and its main aim is to scale up financing to support cities and subnational governments in implementing nature-positive development. The Mayors Forum comprised of mayors from cities around the world, both from developed and developing countries, and there were several other stakeholders, including some representatives from parties, from international organizations, and from various city networks as well. And it provided an opportunity for the mayors and the senior high-level officials that were represented there to share their vision for urban nature, to raise their ambition, and also to make a specific call on increased investment in green and blue infrastructure at the urban scale. The Urban Nature Program has various partners such as multilateral development banks, financial institutions, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And representatives from these partners were asked to show how they can strengthen and scale up investment in urban nature. And for example, they raised the opportunities for new innovative financial products to encourage private sector investment. They also talked about the importance for sharing and expanding knowledge between cities and investment banks and institutions on how nature and biodiversity is solving many of the urban challenges. Particularly looking at the importance of ecological planning and policy development, and as I said just now, financial products that incentivize and support green and blue urban infrastructure. To conclude, I just want to highlight a few very significant statements made by Carlos Rodriguez, who is the CEO and chairman of GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, that were made within our summit. The first one is that he really emphasized the need for structural reform to allow cities and subnational governments to have direct access to funding, which is currently one of the major obstacles for increased investment at those levels, particularly because cities and subnational governments need to work through their national governments to access GEF funding. And the second is the fact that he was talking very strongly around some of the targets, for example, the 30 by 30 targets 1 to 3, and making the point that one needed to also make sure that there was funding for spatial planning at the subnational and local levels to expand conservation areas. So I'm hopeful that going forward, we will see an increased level of investment coming from the GEF also into urban biodiversity. And with this slide, I will conclude my presentation. This was taken from the high-level segment, where you can see fifth from the right is Jean Lemire, who is making a submission on the outcomes of our summit to all of the ministers, the COP presidency, and all of the dignitaries in the final day of the COP16. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So I think what Ingrid was really able to showcase here is that while the official negotiations only delivered mixed results with some key achievements on the one hand, but also some shortcomings, the overall COP as such really underlined the importance of this whole of government approach and the necessity to really have a strong seat at the table for subnationals and that they're also ready to step up and lead the way. So this brings me to my next speaker, which is Florian Freuter. He's a senior expert at ICLEI Europe. He's working in their biodiversity and nature-based solutions teams, as well as the resilience and climate adaptation team. And he has about 12 years of experience with various institutions on a variety of topics, for example, nature-based solutions, climate mitigation, adaptation, also forestry and supply chains, and as well as international experience in several countries such as West Papua, Bolivia, Fiji, and New Zealand. So Florian, I'm excited to have you here. So let's start off with a presentation on the Berlin Urban Nature Pact.
Thank you very much, Olga. I just share my screen. Why can't I find it right now? Yeah, there it is. Right, green in the center. Here we are. Yeah, the Berlin Urban Nature Pact. Thank you for the nice introduction, and I just jump right in. The Berlin Urban Nature Pact is an initiative created and led by the city of Berlin. Here you can see our current consortium being established by ICLEI Europe and ICLEI CBC, located at the ICLEI African Secretariat, and IUCN. It's funded by Berlin, and we're closely related, working together with the Senate of Environment from the city of Berlin. What makes the pact unique? First of all, that it is an initiative by frontrunner cities to unite cities around the world, funded by a city. As I mentioned already, it is the next stepped-up milestone after the Edinburgh Declaration and the Montreal Pledge. It is showcasing local biodiversity action by implementing the goals of the GBF framework. And it introduces a set of highly ambitious, smart targets on local biodiversity action on a city level. And these targets were developed in a comprehensive global consultation process with cities, local and regional authorities over the past 4 years. And for reporting purposes, it is integrated within the Cities with Nature Action platform, which is CBD recognized for monitoring and reporting. Our approach was once, as we established the PACT initiative, with our forming it with our key strategic allies, with the Federal Institute for Nature Conservation, the Ministry for Environment, the City of Montreal, Paris, Austin, and the Scottish Government. Yeah, it took a little bit over 2 years with about 90 cities and municipalities worldwide to come up with this Berlin Urban Nature Pact document in the end, which is now just 7 pages. It is, as I mentioned already, initiated and developed by cities for cities. Highly ambitious, smart targets are included, 28 altogether. It has a clear focus on biodiversity, and it's made for flexibility and synergies, as it is created by cities for cities, and these cities know how cities work. So we integrated lots of flexibility and possibilities to integrate current ongoing local initiatives, plans, actions, which are already running in various cities worldwide. This is just a brief overview about the milestones and steps we've taken until 2024. Olga mentioned already the official high-level launch event at the CBD COP16, which was very successful. I have a slide later on about this. This is a brief overview about the cities which all have been involved in our consultation process. The blue highlighted one were the most active ones, and also some highlighted ones are the net zero cities. So there's a lot of interest also going currently, and we're collecting currently strong interest from cities doing already internal preparations. This is the Berlin Urban Nature Pact is consisting of two main parts. The first one is the 6 implementation principles, which are listed here. It's kind of the common agreement on which principles we'd like to work on together as signatories while committing to the pact. So core of it is, of course, also co-creation, commitment to action, ambition, capacity building, enhancing policy and governance frameworks, and of course the smart targets. These are then the second main part of the pact. It is the 7 target areas, which consist altogether 25 individual targets within these 7 target areas. And also part of the flexibility for the pact is that cities are only obliged to choose 15 out of these 28 targets as a minimum. In best case, at least 1 target from each of the target areas. If we have time later on, we can also jump into some examples into the pact document. This is a great example from the city of Berlin for policy integration. This is where the pact comes in. It directly relates, of course, to the GBF and the Nature Restoration Regulation and the Biodiversity Strategy. And from the bottom-up approach, it kind of tries to be this rocket ship or what spaceship perhaps to kind of which tries to grasp on all the initiatives and actions which are already going on in a city to take it up within the targets of the pact that you can already, all right, check this off, tick this off because you're doing it already. So it also tries to elevate and communicate what a city is currently doing. A brief timeline overview. Towards 2030, we are about to release the Berlin Pact guidance document with templates and some more links and case studies and on how to operationalize the targets. The next step would be then that action plans need to be made ready by cities within 1 year after the signing of the pact. So there's no rush and no pressure, which will then continue into an implementation phase and a stock-taking event in 2030, which also pronounces that targets which will see a strong progress towards the goal will get accounted for. Nothing, not nothing, but it doesn't actually mean that they all have to be achieved exactly by 2030. Because we know it's already 2024. If you have action plans ready in 2025, it just takes time and there's not so many time left until 2030. This is a great picture of the launch, really successful at the COP16. We had a delegation of the Berlin's permanent secretary and our colleague from the Senate, and ICLEI colleagues have been there. We had organized a video, a dialogue, deep dive session for cities. Cali and Utrecht already signed the pact in Cali. And yeah, it was a very successful launch. And now we are kind of into the next steps. Since September 2024, we are establishing within this consortium I mentioned before a coordination office located here at ICLEI in Freiburg, establishing all the structures necessary, working on the update of the Berlin Pact website, the news system, further outreach to cities to become signatories, answering all the questions and collecting FAQs for the website already. Preparation of the signatory event in Berlin in mid-2025, where all the cities which have signed up until then will get invited to. The release of the technical guidance in kind of end of January as a living document. And of course, then we support the cities with preparations of the action plans and also with the registration within the Cities with Nature network. Yeah. I think that's my presentation already. You can see the consortium here and the support, links and contacts. I can pass it around later on as well. And yeah, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Florian. And we have also now shared some links in the chat for everyone that already wants to have a look at this exciting new initiative. And we're looking forward to follow how the Berlin Pact will really scale ambition in more cities that will be joining. Perfect. Thanks. So now we'll move to the city level. We will now hear from Precious Stone Raputsua. He's the municipal manager of Waterberg District Municipality in Limpopo Province in South Africa. And prior to this, he has served in municipalities across 4 provinces as a planner and a strategist, including senior management position, through which he's been able to influence various planning reforms across the country. In addition to various postgraduate and professional certificates, he holds an MSc degree in development planning from the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. So, Mr. Raputsua, I'm really excited to have you here. So you actually attended the CBD COP16 and the 8th Summit of Subnational Governments and Cities on behalf of the Waterberg District Municipalities. So we'd like to hear from you. What are your reflections on the outcomes of the negotiations at the summit, and to what extent do you think that they will be impacting your work? And I think, first of all, you'll actually give us a brief introduction of actually where Waterberg is located. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Olga, and also greetings to my fellow panelists and all the guests on the platform. I think if we can go to the next slide. That is just a map, the first one there, to show the serenity of Waterberg, and then I think these are what we'll actually cover in terms of responding to the question. Let's just get to the next one. So this is Waterberg. So what we have done, we've just reduced it to the provincial level, but which is within South Africa. We have about 9 provinces, as actually shown by. And one of the provinces in South Africa, it's actually Limpopo, as shown by the map on the left, which is made up of about 5 districts or regional local governments, and the Waterberg then is actually on the right, or the slide, which is actually made up of those 5 locals municipalities that constitute then the district municipality of Waterberg. Thank you. If you can go to the next slide. Now, if we just to respond on the question, I think most of the aspects of our inputs, Ingrid also covered on those, and that's exactly what we observed. I think it was quite a very tough COP, but the good thing about it is that at the end, everyone converged and spoke in one voice, and amidst, I think, the robust engagements that happened at the beginning. But by and large, it was more of, the taking forward, I think, the agreements that emerged from the COP15, and it actually sought to take forward the implementations and concretize some of the decisions that were there, and other aspects actually were becoming clearer, as you'll be showing in the next slides. You can proceed to the next slides. Now, in the next slides, I think what came through was that, I think, when I think it was coined by the mayor of Cali, when the emphasis was our time is now, where we need to begin moving towards making peace with nature, because of actually what has transpired, or what has the effects or the impacts of our actions as humans in nature, and also the consequences thereafter. And some of the take homes, I think, that one looking at Waterberg, I just listed some of the, I think, from the agreements, some of the decisions that I thought even our LD sub is beginning to take those forward. For example, that of recognition of the indigenous communities and groups, and also that goes with your indigenous plants as well, and species as well. which may not necessarily be located found anywhere else, but can be, let's say, for example, found in Waterberg, and how we then preserve that, for the next generation, so that they're able to benefit from that. Because some of them are medicinal and so forth. And also, when we now talk about the concept of rural development, that means when we move towards urbanizing some of the rural development, what are some of the aspects that we then have to preserve to ensure that we don't lose them? And I think that falls within that aspect. And also the biodiversity and health, meaning that the health of biodiversity, the health of humans and the environment at large, how do we preserve that? Still goes within the aspect of making peace with nature, so that then we can actually be able to leverage the benefits of what actually nature gives to us. And of course, how we then handle issues of indigenous, the invasive plants and so forth, so that we are not necessarily losing our environment or the biodiversity as a consequence of some of the indigenous species that actually intermingles with them. So those are some of the I think the what one actually to go. And I think of paramount importance, then financing. I think mobilization of finances became quite key, and I think also Ingrid touched on it in terms of, I think, the commitments that were made from the bigger cities and then towards actually also helping or supporting the cities from the developing countries to then be able to actually benefit into that. And I think as Waterberg, we are one of those that actually are beginning to benefit, I think, through the work that ICLEI has actually been doing with us, even as we demonstrate later on under the Nail River project. You can go to the next slide. In terms of the LBCEP, and then maybe let's go to the next one as well. So in terms of the LBCEP, okay, here we just want to show, so that when we talk, it also relates to what I was saying earlier on. Waterberg, it's about 70% of Waterberg, it's within the UNESCO biosphere, and I think which then demonstrate the importance of us then taking care of the environment, or the biodiversity and so forth from every aspect of our planning and development, so that then nature, we can actually leverage, the benefits of nature. We have quite a lot of wonderful species within Waterberg. In fact, we are the most hot area within South Africa because of the serene nature of the district, from the wildlife aspect, just your normal climate or environment. That actually plays a very important role towards that. The next slide actually shows just supplements this one from the environmental management zone perspectives to show the environmental aspects of Waterberg. Now, if you go to the next slide, we are talking about what is the vision of the LBCEP in Waterberg. In totality, the vision is seeks to really mainstream biodiversity within Waterberg, and ultimately move towards more of or green economy, that actually where we begin to leverage on the benefits of nature within our economy. Of course, the sectors of the economy of Waterberg, it's your tourism, agriculture, mining, and within tourism, agriculture and tourism, we have your wildlife, but we then the green economy aspect of it actually links those two together. So we are then, when this LBCEP was actually developed, we have begun to take it through different of our stakeholders, the private sector, civil society, and everyone else, so that they begin to appreciate in terms of their role within Waterberg, what is it that actually they will be they'll be expected to do, and how are they going to benefit from that. And it's also done in line with the LBCEP from the country, and then it covers a number of international or UN and as well as African goals in as far as issues of environment are concerned. If we move to the next one, I think Olga, you also asked on the issues of Nile River. This is what now the culmin or the outcome of one of the programs or projects from the LBCEP, where we say the Nile River was actually identified as one of the key interventions in terms of biodiversity planning, reservations, and so forth, where because this river was actually affected, or one of the challenges was that of pollution of the river or the catchment from some of the municipal sewer spillages, and also normal littering of which actually leads into some of the unwanted components going there, like your plastics and so forth, then which actually poses dangers to other species that actually use the river as the habitat and so forth. Therefore, rehabilitating that or this project then seeks to then bring back that life, that diversity of the river, and also the quality of water in the river, and ultimately other users of the water downstreams from this river. But so and also enhances the tourism or aquatourism aspect of the river that it actually plays in the communities within the municipality. So I think from the financing point of view, I think ICLEI has actually been working with Waterback and introduced Waterback, I think, to enlist as one of this project as one of through the TAP for profiling and ultimately financing, so that then we're able to realize the ideals that we actually put in place for this river. So this is the culmination of all the lessons that we have learned since we are invited from the last COP up to this one, where we've actually built up in terms of even the type of partners and stakeholders that we can bring to the fore to ensure that number of projects like this one that we've identified are then realized, and we begin to demonstrate how then biodiversity mainstreaming actually works in as far as our development as a municipality is concerned. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Maybe just one concrete question to you. So you mentioned that for the Nile River project, I think you're still obviously looking for funding, and you're currently trying to leverage the transformative actions program to seek funding for this. What are the main funding sources that you're seeking? Is it more the private sector? Is it more international development banks? Like, who do you think the main target group would be?
I think it's more of a open basket for in terms of who, because you may find that you may have different stakeholders who may fund different components of that, and we are very much open to that in terms of we'll be engaging with different role players in as far as that is concerned. And also I think the National Department of Environment has shown keen interest in terms of coming in. So basically it's more of going to be like a blended funding of that, which augurs quite well, I think, from the side of private sector, because then they are able to see the seriousness of government. If government is able to put resources into that, as opposed to when you're saying, no, we want 100% funding. It's sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, but I think that the blended route then actually enhances that interest from all the stakeholders here.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks a lot, and also for your insights on the outcomes of the CBD COP and the importance that it also gave to indigenous communities, and how that might then reflect on the work that you're doing, and obviously also your efforts to really align your local biodiversity action plan and strategy with the national one, to really be able to showcase what your city can do to really reach those international targets. So thank you so much. We will now move on to the next city. So we're actually moving from South Africa to Austria, and specifically to the city of Vienna. So here, I'm fortunate to have two speakers with us here today. So we have Bettina Scheiderbauer. She's the head of Department of Nature Conservation and Geodata at the city of Vienna, and she has more than 20 years of experience in project and financial management of international projects, with obviously specific focus on biodiversity and nature. And she is also responsible for the implementation of tasks related to the Natura 2000 network, and also with various directives at the EU level. And she has a master in nature conservation engineering. With her is Ferdinand Schmeller. So he's project manager in the which he's in, and he's worked in several species conservation projects. And in addition to that, he actually also elaborated the Neo-Biota strategy and the management plan for Vienna, and he too has a master in nature conservation engineering. So thanks so much for being with us here today. Also for you, I have a couple of questions. So your city, Vienna, actually boasts a remarkable amount of green space. Almost half of the city is actually made up of parks, of meadows, and there's even a national park in your jurisdiction. So in a way, you're actually already surpassed the target 3 of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, which is to conserve 30% of land, waters, and seas. And all of this is kind of embedded in your Vienna Forest and Meadow Charter, as well as various action plans. So could you share some insights on Vienna's biodiversity commitments, as well as then this charter?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to have the possibility to give some or a short overview of how the city of Vienna is dealing with halting biodiversity loss and protecting green space in a growing city. We are almost 2 million people. The city of Vienna is aware of the fact that natural and near natural space is essential for the high quality of life. So therefore, Vienna developed the Vienna Wood and Meadows Charter you mentioned before, which is a commitment to secure the protection of woods, meadows, and water bodies. The charter was enacted by the City Council in 2020. Next slide, please. The charter is based on 12 guiding principles you see here on the slide. The focus is to address all important topics which affect green spaces. So we have from sustainable urban development, climate protection and climate change adaptation, to conservation and enhancement of biodiversity in forests, meadows, and near natural waters, to protecting the soil, wildlife management, but also research and education or accessibility by public transportation. Along these 12 principles, the involved municipal departments developed under the guidance of the Municipal Department of Environmental Protection a process to implement measures achieving the goals set within the Charter. And as you mentioned before, Vienna has a percentage of 50% within the city boundaries, which is green space. And one of the most important goals is to preserve and, where necessary, enhance the quality of these green spaces. We have within the boundaries a national park, we have a biosphere reserve, 5 Natura 2000 sites, and a lot of inner city parks and green spaces. And I want to point out 2 important measures which are part of the Charter and are already in implementation, which is on the one hand a development of grazing management, so that we can have a grazing throughout green spaces of the city. And a very important measure is the restoration of the river Leasing to a near natural state. And we have a total of 18 kilometers. And actually now we have 9.2 kilometers, which are already restored. And that was made by a LIFE project with EU funding. But one of the most important key areas we now are addressing is a former train station, which is the Bahnhof Breitenlee, train station Breitenlee. And there we have an area with important species and which we want to restore and landscapes. Yes. And what I wanted to mention is that Vienna is just signing the Berlin Urban Nature Pact. It's just a matter of days, I hope. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks also for already touching on the Breitenlee area. So here again, Vienna is kind of leading the way with that restoration project. So both nature restoration features prominently at the UN level, but also at the EU level, no? So here we're looking forward to some more insights on you about this project, and also would be great if you could also share some details about the funding mechanism that you're using to put that in practice.
Yeah, so I pass over to my colleague.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present the project. We are talking about the future nature conservation area Breitenlee. It's a project. The project area is about 19 hectares in size and was created in the course of the construction of a marshalling yard, or better, its abandonment in the late 1920s. The removal of soil and the dry climate in the east of Vienna, which is typically, have created nutrient-poor, dry, open land habitats that are unique in Vienna. Most of the habitats correspond to the OINES habitat type 6240, which are steppe grasslands, and we have this habitat type, or we have this habitat type in the national park and in Breitenlee, so it's very specific and very special. Unfortunately, succession fights have now severely impaired the habitats and thus also the local species, such as sand lizards or orchids. This is where we come in. We want to restore the habitats through the removal of woody plants and intensive neophyte management, and promote the local species through targeted measures. Especially the intensive neophyte management is one main focus, since this is one of the biggest problems. But Vienna is also growing very fast. It's one of the fastest growing cities in Europe, and therefore we think recreational use will be a huge challenge in the future. We expect recreational use to increase strongly due to the anticipated development of settlements in the area, and therefore another focus is on controlling recreational use and intensive area management. In order to ensure that the habitats are preserved in the long term and with the necessary dynamics, we are planning to establish an extensive pasture landscape, and we will designate the area as Natura 2000 site to ensure its long-term protection. The pasture landscape is also a way to get people off the valuable habitats, and the focus is just to look at the habitats but not to go there actually. So we will have pathways around the habitats with the possibility to look inside the area. The pasture area will have a size of at least 20 hectares, and cattle will ensure that the habitats are conserved in a way that is resource efficient and brings the necessary dynamics to the habitats, which is crucial to preserve them in long term. Yes. And in the long term, we plan to implement further projects on the site. We will have a focus on environmental education and direct marketing of products from the neighboring agricultural land. And if you look at the graphic on the right, you can see in yellow the project area, and as you can see, it's a part of the green belt around Vienna, and one of the aims is to close this green belt and to use the area as a corridor for species too. This is one of the main aims, and of course to restore the habitats and making Vienna fit in the view of the nature restoration law. So these are the main focuses. Next slide, please. Yeah, and here you can see the project area painted in blue, or the blue circle shows the area where we want to have this pasture area, and in pink you see a corridor down to the national park Donauauen, which is also part of the area, but will not be part of the pasture landscape. Next slide. Doch, eine habe ich noch. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, and concerning the funding, we have applied for two different types of funding. We would like to fund the measures on the side by a live project. We are quite optimistic that we will be able to obtain the relevant funding, as the area contains the habitats and numerous priority species mentioned above, like sand lizards, for example. In addition, we are taking up various strategies and regulations, such as the nature restoration law or the IIS ordinance. And accordingly, we are also able to ensure the importance of the project and the coverage of the necessary equity internally. This was one huge step that we could show how important the area is and that the city of Vienna needs to invest in this area. Our project will have a total volume of about 5.5 million euros, and we are expecting 68% funding. The implementation of the project itself will be carried out by us, by the city of Vienna. But we have project partners, of course, like the Museum for Natural History, which will do all the monitorings, and which is also crucial because it's very interesting, because this area is of such great importance that everybody in Vienna knows it, or leading scientists in Vienna know the area, and therefore it was very easy to gain partners working with us in this project, like BirdLife Austria, which is also who are also a partner. And we have also ICLEI Europe as a partner in the project for dissemination, which we are very glad to have ICLEI in the project. So these are the measures, but of course it's much easier to set measures on an area if you are the owner of the area. So the ownership was one key prerequisite for us. So we are about to purchase 65 hectares of these 90 hectares. And we want to gain we want to have this subsidized by the National Biodiversity Fund, which grants up to 100% funding, and whose funds come from the Austrian Recovery Resilience Plan 2020 to 2026. And we are very optimistic that we will receive the subsidy for this fund, and we have already prepared the purchase. So
Perfect.
we are about to take the next step.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Ferdinand. So I think here again, also the commonality actually between Waterberg and Vienna in this case, that both cases are actually looking for blended finance, realizing that obviously these really big restoration projects, it's really hard to just find one entity that is able to secure the funding for this. Perfect. Thanks so much. So with an eye to the time, we'll actually be moving to our next speaker and final speaker, but last but not least, obviously. So here we will move from Austria up north to the German city of Hamburg. And here I'm happy to introduce to you Bernd Ulrich Netz. So in 2013, he actually became the head of nature conservation in Hamburg and has since 2021 been the head of nature conservation and green spaces in Hamburg. He has worked as a landscape architect in a planning office prior to that, and actually managed a local station for nature conservation, tourism, and agriculture in Schleswig-Holstein. By training, he is actually a biologist and studied in Hamburg as well as Sussex in England. Great. We're happy to have you with us here. So Hamburg is actually quite famous for its green roof strategy, and it's really been a front runner in the field. So could you shed some light on the strategy and how it supports Hamburg in terms of its biodiversity goals?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. The core of the strategy is a combination of regulation, dialogue, financial incentives, scientific advice, and evaluation. And could we see the slide, please? And we looked very in detail at what the green roofs preserve or what they do. And we checked for the beetles. And in 3 years, we found 314 beetle species on the green roofs in Hamburg, on 7 different roofs we monitored, and 49 of them are endangered of extinction. So the green roofs are not as good as a nature reserve, but they do function as connective device to bring the species from one green area to the next green area. And the more green roofs we have, the more efficient this works.
Perfect. And then we're also looking forward to hear from you about some notable achievements in the field and how you were able to actually finance them.
Yes, right. We have a Green Roof Financial Support Program, and this is important in combination with public relations and dialogue, the most important feature in creating awareness and bringing the greens on the roof. The financial program covers now 7 million euros, and we are partly financing flagship projects like the Green Bunker in St. Pauli, which you see on the slides here, as well as standard buildings, as long as it's not mandatory to have a green roof. The green roof area in Hamburg has risen from about 120 hectares to almost 200 hectares now. So we have a good increase, but still only 5% of all the flat roofs in Hamburg are green, and this is not enough. And so we decided, also we have shown that green roofs are economically efficient. We decided to have a mandatory scheme. So starting from 2027, every new roof or any roof which is completely built new on the existing house has to be greened in combination with solar energy.
Great, thanks so much. And I think here also really interesting to see how the city is actually using their own funding to support then citizens and residents to actually green their roofs to kind of support the overall city strategy of obviously enhancing biodiversity and also creating these connecting points. Thanks so much. And then you also brought with us one specific example of how actually the city of Hamburg is raising funds for nature protection. So we're very excited to actually hear about the Nature Center from you.
Okay, very much. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. We have in Hamburg or in Germany in general, we have a municipal tax, which is a property tax. So every piece of ground in the area has to pay a tax each year. And if you have arable land, the tax is very low, about 10 euros per hectare. But if you turn the arable land into housing or commercial developments, the tax rises to 30,000 euro a year. Next slide, please. And in 2060, we had some decisions on major housing development in Hamburg. And in this time, we decided that the government decided that we will spend the property tax of any new housing areas or industrial areas within the green part of the city, which you see here, for green purposes. So the strict nature reserve are excluded; they are not to be built anyway. But if we can't prevent any housing project in the green areas, we don't like it, but then we rather take the money. So it's not any more money for the taxpayers. They pay the same money, but the city decided to spend the money on green purposes. Next slide, please. And in the case of the Nature Center, we use the money for the maintenance and development of parks and nature reserve, because we think if we have more people in the city, the parks and nature reserve are more used as recreation areas, and so we need more money to preserve and develop them. And in 2025, we received 1.8 million. And since to the major development schemes of the past, we expect 5 million euros in 2030. And it's going on and on. So it's not only a one-time pay, but it's accumulating over the years, and it's in addition to any mandatory regulations.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And I hear also a good example of what's the kind of this political leadership can bring, no, in terms of making that, very concrete decision that yes, let's use the taxes for this specific purpose to really enhance the quality and make sure that, despite all the building pressure, we're still able to have these high quality green spaces. So thanks so much. Great. So we're unfortunately already at the end of the webinar. So I'd like to, again, virtually thank all the speakers for the contributions. And actually, I would like to invite all of those that are, situated in Europe or also in Latin America to also join us later today for a webinar. Also, actually the same topic. However, we will actually have different speakers there. So there you will hear from the cities of Berlin, from the city of Cali in Colombia, as well as then from the city of Boulder in the US about their strategies to enhance their biodiversity commitments and actually to mobilize finance. So again, thank you so much for your participation, and I wish you everyone a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.